Hello and welcome to episode 160 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fate and me, Andy Leakes. Damien, welcome back. How was your Christmas and New Year? We're back.
Yeah, we are back. It was brilliant, Andy. Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
I had a really good break, actually. We did a lot of work, piled right up to Christmas, and set things up so I could actually have a break and spend time with the family and everything. And it was great. And today was the first day I went back into the office and back on everything. I mean, doing Money to the Masses, you're always checking things. You're never 100% gone, but I was able to switch off as much as it's possible to do. So no, it was good. Spent plenty of time with the family and in-laws and all sorts. So I had a very enjoyable Christmas. I now feel suitably recharged. How about you?
Yeah, no, pretty much the same. You know, tried to turn off all the laptops and everything else as much as I could. I kept an eye on a few emails, but pretty much had 2 weeks off. Near as damn it, I had sort of 12 or 13 days off. So I feel like you, fully recharged, ready to go, New Year and everything.
I don't know about you, Andy, but I feel like those rest periods give you the motivation for when you go back. And when you have those periods, you think, do you know what, I actually enjoyed. Because it can become sort of all-consuming. It's quite nice to have that break. So maybe I need to have some New Year's resolutions that include taking sort of a break away from things. And but not that you'd notice what we do, because we're always pushing stuff out all the time. But from my end. But anyway, that's quite a good link, because one of the things we're doing today is about New Year's resolutions, so we'll come on to that. But before we do that, Andy, I just wanted to mention to people, if you don't follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I mean, we did all the videos up until the end of 2017 with the We Need to Talk About Money series, and that's likely to come back, or some variation of it. But one of the things you would have seen is that what I like to call the Wall of Love has appeared in our office. So while I was away, the elves were busy in the Money to the Masses offices and put up a decal stick. I mentioned it, didn't I, in the previous podcast? And
You did indeed.
Yeah, and what we've done is we've got a designer in to pull together just a smidgen of the feedback we get for things like the podcast, the 30-Day Money Plan book, 80/20 Investor, the website generally, everything we do, and pull together the best pieces and put it into a design. And I went into the office today and saw it for the first time. There were 2 walls either side of the office, so go and have a look. There's a video clip about a minute long of me grinning like a fool and just loving every minute of it, so you can see what it looks like. So thank you to all those people who do write in. I read all the emails that you send in, and so that you don't realise how motivating that stuff can be. And the reason we did it was to help spur us on in those moments that everybody has when you need a bit of a pick-me-up and motivation. And it also is very good at reminding us why we do what we do. So, and the lives we help change and people we help. So that was brilliant. So that was the quick thing. Have a look at that on Facebook and Instagram, and do follow me, because there is some of the stuff we post on Instagram we don't put other places. One of the things, for example, is when I do this podcast, I sketchnote, which I don't know if people know what sketchnotes are. They are a means of basically pictorial representations of notes. So rather than having a list of what you're going to talk about, there might be just drawings on a piece of paper. I'm looking at one today that's got a pig on it that I've drawn, and that helps me as a prompt of what I'm going to talk about, because this isn't scripted, what we do. The topics are planned, so you can see those. I publish those. It's a new thing I've been doing, and so I publish those normally around about the time the podcast comes out, so you get a bit of insight into what's going to possibly be on the show each week. So anyway,
I do recommend our listeners check those out, because I've been lucky enough, certainly in the early days when we did the podcast in the same room, and from time to time we meet up to do the podcast, and I sit in awe on the other side of the microphone looking at you doing your notes, sometimes updating them, or if you've come prepared with the notes already there. And they are, it's like a little story with various different pictures and bubbles and
it's a
doodles.
It's a bunch of doodles. That's what it looks like to people. It looks like I've sat there on the phone just doodling.
But it's not a mess, though. It's all sort of, it's all around a theme, and it is really quite impressive, I have to say.
Well, you can condense this stuff down. So what it is on this week's podcast. Now, New Year's resolutions are an obvious thing we're going to talk about. So I'm going to touch upon that, but in a different way, more about how to keep them. And then we're going to move on to something about credit card fees and the charges that shops and firms apply when you want to use a credit card or sometimes a debit card, because the rules have changed, and I want to talk about that. And also, one of the things that it's been Christmas and you've all got, well, you might not all have got, but many of you have got vouchers for various shops or online stores or whatever. And so I want to talk about those because they have expiry dates and you need to check those. But I'm going to list some of those expiry dates for some of the main vouchers out there, because they do expire. People think they get a voucher and it might last forever. It doesn't. You lose your money, so you need to make sure you spend it before either the company goes bust or it expires. So we're going to do that. And I'm going to mention something very quickly about investing at the end. So that's just something looking back. So shall I get underway with the resolution piece, Andy?
Yeah, let's do New Year's resolutions.
Have you got any? Have you decided to have any New Year's resolutions?
Well, funny you should say that. I know you spoke about this piece earlier on where you said about the fact that you're going to maybe talk about how to keep them. And that's exactly what I've been thinking about this year, that I always make resolutions and more often than not tend to fail in those because I always make really grand plans. So essentially what I've decided to do this year is to do lots of mini resolutions and tackle them month by month. And I'm going to write a book on it and it's going to be out at the end of next year. So there you go, letting the cat out of the bag early. Andy's writing a new book for 2018 and it's all about resolutions. But I'm going to do a new resolution every month. And it's going to be called something like The Power of 12 or 12 Reasons Why or something like that.
I love it, Andy. See, look at that. I didn't even know about this. You just told me that. Live on the podcast. But interestingly, what you've described there is something that's come to light when I've been looking into what makes people keep resolutions. And I don't know if you know, 37% of people make the New Year resolution to save money. So more than a third of us will say we're going to save money.
Wow.
For whatever reason. And
that's higher than I thought, actually.
It's the third highest. I think a lot of the others were, I think 1 and 2 were things to do with weight and possibly something like smoking or whatever. I can't remember what they were, but I was obviously more drawn to what the money side was, and that was number 3 on the list. Now, one of the things, when you look at it, most people don't actually manage to keep a New Year's resolution, and apparently by the 31st of January, a third of people have already ditched their New Year's resolution. Now, I was even surprised 2/3 of people made it that far, but a third definitely have ditched it, and most people don't even take that long. Of that third, most of them already give up in days. So I'm intrigued about the idea of how do you keep a New Year's resolution, whether it's money or something else. Now, in the money world, obviously, if you want to save money, how could you do it? Now, there was some research by the University of Chicago that looked into what made people most likely or more likely to keep a New Year's resolution and more likely to succeed. And the key was you needed to have an immediate joy or an immediate sort of success that happened very quickly. So you had to get some feedback on that resolution almost immediately.
Okay.
So to give you an example that's non-money related, if you were going to say you wanted to get fit. Now, getting fit is a long-term goal. Obviously, you've got a long-term aim. That's why you often do resolutions, to try and change something. But you're more likely to obtain it if there's an immediacy to some of that. So it might be actually breaking it down. And the aim is to go to the gym. So as soon as you go to the gym, you've got an immediate feedback, a bit of positive joy out of that resolution. And it's by doing that, you've got more chance. It's human psychology that you've got more chance of actually achieving your long-term aim. And I suppose they don't use this sort of analogy, but it's a bit like taking the first step. Every journey begins with a single step, and not taking on Mount Everest. It's like doing that small bit, but you're getting that satisfaction and ticking it off. So the key, if you're going to have any resolution based on this research, is you need to therefore break it down into something, into lots of smaller resolutions, which was why I was smiling. People on the podcast wouldn't have known when you started talking about the idea of breaking your resolutions down or having lots of small ones. They claim that you're more likely to succeed on a resolution if you break it down. So therefore, that one resolution could become multiple smaller ones that are build up to that bigger goal. So that example I gave, the gym might be one of them. And by doing that, you might have more chance of succeeding. But they also show that if you split your resolution into one of two categories, and they tend to fall into either promotional goals, so they're aspirational, or they become what they call a prevention goal. So it's some sort of obligation to do it. So you're trying to, let's say, aspirational. It may be you're trying to, again, lose weight to look good in a dress or something. Do you know what I mean? That's it's there's an aspiration. There's something you're trying to do. Whereas an obligation, it would be in that example, you're trying to lose weight so you don't develop diabetes. That is the one's an obligation and one is aspirational, and you're much more likely, if you can try and create goals that have got an aspirational aspect to them, they've proven that you're more likely to actually keep that resolution and achieve that goal. So if we take that into the round with money, then you are more likely to succeed if you're trying to save money or to trying to reduce your bills. So you may be thinking, I'm going to cut my bills or sort my finances out. You're more likely to achieve it if there is a link to something positive at the end, something you're aspiring to. So you may achieve that, and with that money you might end up going to somewhere on holiday, or you might do something with that. That's got a motivation. And if some of that motivation can be brought forward, so you say you saved money and part of that sum was used to do something you liked very immediately, whether it's buy a cup of coffee. I know perhaps coffee's not the best example, because that's one of the ways they tell you to save money, by not drinking coffee, although I do I do believe that's a little bit nonsense. I do think you've got to have some enjoyment in life.
Yeah.
But you can see that if you saved some money in a bigger way and you're able to have that coffee, you're still net better off. Then you can see there's a positive that comes along. And some of that is being built into one or two financial products that I've seen. There's some life insurance products out there that do that, where they actually give you a free weekly coffee if you, I won't name check them, but they give you a free weekly coffee if you do certain activities in terms of health-wise. So it's like medical insurance as well. And so that incentive encourages you to have that immediacy, that long-term aim of trying to be fit, because you're getting coffee along the way, which you like. So if you're trying to do a New Year's resolution around money, think, can I break it down into smaller resolutions? But more importantly, can I break it down into things that are aspirational, so that promotional goal, and try and stop it being an obligation, something that's a bit more of a chore. And if you can try and do that, where there's some of that, you save money, but you may actually reward yourself very small amounts nearer, then that can actually help you achieve that long-term goal, which might be to maybe save enough money to go somewhere or do something. So it's an interesting take on resolutions. Rather than me trying to tell people what you should give up or what you should do with money, that's up to you. But as a final aside, before we move on to the next bits in the podcast, I did happen to come across a fairly unusual idea, that there's an app out there. I've not used it, called Oval, so I'm not recommending it, but it's an app that is used to help you to save. It pretty much works like some of these ideas I've talked about in the past, whereby it rounds up, say you went to the shop and you spent some money, then it would help round up whatever you spent and move that into a savings account, which I'm a big fan of, that concept. And we've talked about before, I have that on one of my bank accounts.
Do you remember, Damien, I once called you up one lunchtime, very excited about this new idea that I'd had, and you said, Andy, that's a brilliant idea, but it's already been done like a million times by lots of other people, but you're on the right track. do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. We and Andy do have some off-pod conversations every now and then when Andy has a brilliant idea. But this app has now launched a separate part to it, which is related to Facebook. And one of the resolutions some people might have is that I want to give up all those devices, like you said, Andy. That they might want to stop using Facebook so much. And I've got a friend who is basically having a bet with his wife that he could give up Facebook for a year. And I think, forget what the monetary amount he's going to win if he does it. But what this app does is, every time you use Facebook, it therefore prompts you to save money, move money to a savings account. So it's trying to, it's a bit like, imagine like a swear box, but instead of swearing, having a swear box, you've got Facebook and you move it into your savings account. It's quite a nice idea. I've not tried it. It does seem a little bit gimmicky, but there you go. If you're trying to give up Facebook, there is something that can help you save at the same time. So people are trying to combine the two. Before we move on, Andy, I just wanted to quickly mention 80/20 Investor. Now, 80/20 Investor is my DIY investment service. Do go and check it out. I empower and teach people how to invest their own money. The service provides data-driven fund tables. The data is driven by my own unique 80/20 investor algorithm, which I created. You also get stop-loss alerts, you get research articles and insights, you get market commentaries, monthly commentaries and DIY investment lessons, but you also get access to my £50,000 portfolio, which is a portfolio of my own money, which I run live on the site for members to see, and it shows people how I use the service to maximise my returns. And in the first 2 years of doing so, I turned £50,000 into £59,500, which is a 19% return, beating investment managers, professional fund managers, financial advisors, investment banks, passive trackers and the market. So everybody can have a free 30-day trial of 80/20 Investor, and you can claim that by going to moneytothemasses.com and going and clicking on the 80/20 Investor hyperlink at the top of the page. So go and try the service. Let me know what you think of it, and I know from the feedback that you're going to love it. But for now, on with the show.
Okay, so we're talking credit card and specifically credit card fees. What are we talking about, Damien?
You know when you go and buy something and you decide you elect to pay maybe by a credit card and sometimes by a debit card, but particularly if you opt to pay by credit card, they'll suddenly charge or levy a fee of a certain amount of money. Now, in the past, that was hideous. They could make up that amount of money as they wanted. Airlines were notorious for creating this admin fee that was being applied only to if you had a credit card. And now EU rules came in at one point that tried to stop that being too aggressive. What the rules became that they could still apply those rules, those charges to people who wanted to use, for example, credit cards to pay, and they weren't obviously charging people who weren't using credit cards or paying by cash anything. As long as it wasn't too excessive, the charge, they were under EU rules allowed to charge it up to, it was a small percentage. It was about, I think it was 0.3% or something. It was a relatively small amount. It may have even been as high as 3%. But
Damien, can I ask what the general thinking is on that in terms of in the finance sector and being able to just levy that charge on? What is is it more expensive for the companies or not, or is it just literally because they can? Is there any general rule?
Well, the idea is that the likes of Visa will levy a charge for the transactions that go through on their system. So if you go and pay by a card that's got Visa, the shops are being charged. So the idea being, if you're a huge company, then you should be able to swallow up some of that, because at the end of the day, you're making a lot of money along the way, and as somebody pays, the amount that those fees equate to almost diminish. So that's why you never got charged them at the likes of Tesco or a supermarket. But then you might get charged if you went to your local corner shop at the top of the road, or they say there's a minimum. Now, it seemed to be, when you looked at it, I think it was Which did a super complaint at some point, where they looked at the levels being charged, and it was way in excess of anything. It wasn't even correlated to the amount they were being charged by these companies. They were just being excessive. It was another way to profit, and particularly with airlines, you know how they work. Every time you want to get on a plane and you want to breathe, they charge you an extra bit because it's a low-cost airline. So this was just another method of being able to take money. But the good news is that from the 13th of January 2018, that they're being banned, that you can no longer do that. So therefore you shouldn't theoretically be charged anything to pay by credit card, for example. You shouldn't be paid an additional amount. So you'll see lots of stuff in the news about people saying, hooray, this is wonderful, and consumer rights and sort of power to the people. But I just wanted to tell people that was coming so they could be aware of it and make sure that happens. But there's a slight, sting in the tail with it, because companies are always notorious for trying to get around new rules, and they've done it with this. And there are companies that are now starting to either just increase their prices, so the price goes up. You might not be charged a fee explicitly because that's no longer going to be allowed, but they're going to just put the price up anyway, so you are paying it, but just the quoted price is higher. Or they may charge an explicit fee that's called a service charge, And that might be an additional amount, say, of 50p. And they're calling it a service charge. And I'm doing that stupid inverted commas thing with my fingers as I'm on the podcast. But the problem is, because they can't just levy it on a credit card transaction, what they will do is they will levy it on everyone. So if you paid by cash, there would be a 50p service charge, or whatever it may be. Or if you paid by debit card, there would also be one. And the reason I say that, because there are companies out there like Just Eat. Just Eat is one of the ones that many people will know. You know, the takeaway company. They are applying a charge and of 50p. They've decided that's what they're going to do. Other companies may play charges, but the point is that some of these companies along the line are going to, if they want to apply a charge, it's got to be for everyone. You can't single out a customer just because of the means they are paying, that they pay the charge and other people don't, because that's unfair. So,
is it just me, or has it made it almost more confusing and potentially a little bit more murky, in that, you know, big companies like Just Eat and potentially others are going to follow suit, whereby they're just looking to replace that revenue, albeit via another loophole and what is now a legally accepted sort of route of just basically fleecing customers for that extra bit of money, so they can, I suppose they've got bills to pay and stuff. I don't know.
I'm with you, Andy. I don't mind they have bills to pay as long as it's relevant. But I also think that if they want to allow some people to pay by certain means, then some of these companies are huge and they might be just profiteering slightly. But it's one of those instances where you could have avoided the charge previously, whereas now you're effectively going to have to pay it no matter what. So anyway, it's just a bit of an FYI to people out there.
Okay, so Christmas has just gone, and we mentioned vouchers earlier. I also got some vouchers, so I'm keen to hear about this piece. Vouchers have an expiry date. You're going to tell us what we need to do and some other tips and tricks if anyone out there has received vouchers themselves.
Well, the biggest one is you always have to check that what the expiry date is on a voucher. If you've bought one for somebody, but more importantly, if you've received it. Now, if you find out what the expiry date is and you're not going to use it, you can buy and sell vouchers online. There is a site called Zeek, ZEEK, which is one that does it, and so you can actually effectively get your money back or be able to trade it for something else. But what I really wanted just to quickly sum up is that Which and Fairer Finance are two companies, obviously everyone who knows who Which are. They decided to just try and compile a list of some of the gift cards out there with expiry dates, because I personally think they shouldn't have expiry dates. I just think that's not right. I think if they've taken your money, they should honour the fact that at some point that you might want to buy something from them. But of course, lots of them have very short expiry dates, so it's confusing and there's no consistency. So what they did is they went through some of the biggest and most popular ones and listed them. And so what I want to do is just very quickly, because there will be lots of people sitting on a train, or like you, Andy's got a voucher, didn't even look at the expiry date, but I'm going to list through some of the expiry dates on some of these things, and they'll go, oh yeah, I got one of those. Oh, actually that means I've got until June to spend it. So I'm just trying to help people out on this one. So if you think about some of the worst people, there are companies out there that actually have expiry dates of 6 months or even 10 months. Now, the ones that they picked out as 6 months, I don't know them. People out there might know them. The Orangery at Kensington Palace, Tea Parlour in Liverpool. These are some of the types of people. Amara Spa is one of them. But I'm going to move on from those ones because there's some of the lesser known companies. But 10-month expiry dates. Buyagift.co.uk, which is an online site.
I've been victim of those many a time. I've had a Ferrari driving experience that expired on me. I had a skydiving experience that expired on me. An alpaca walk that expired on me. Damien, I could list at least 6 experience things that we've bought for each other, my wife and I, and never ever gone on. We've never had an experience together, and we must have bought at least half a dozen, if not more. I think there's probably more. In fact, that I know that there's a hot air balloon trip that's just about to expire at the end of this month.
See, exactly. So there are people who get that. I didn't realise. There was one my wife bought me for Father's Day, and it was a gin tasting tour. If you're ever in London, go to the City of London. There is a gin distillery in the City of London. So when I mean the city, it's right by St Paul's, so near the finance area of London. And it's the only gin distillery in the City of London. It's incredible. You go around it, really fun to do. But mine actually almost expired. I only booked it a day before it was due to expire. And that was only because my brother and my dad had the same present and they had noticed the expiry date. So that is 10 months. I think 10 months is way too short because, anyway. So if you've got one for Christmas, it's going to be probably from the point the person bought it. So you're looking at September, October. Ones with 1 year, now Claridge's, Betty's Tea Room, Ocado, Costa Coffee, View Cinemas, Westfield Shopping Centre, Ticketmaster, and White Stuff, whatever that is.
You don't know White Stuff?
What is White Stuff? I know what the White Company is, but I don't assume it's not the same thing.
White Stuff is a fairly popular clothing chain.
It's clothes, Andy. I don't know anything about clothes.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm sitting here in a pair of tracksuit bottoms doing this podcast.
I've been the victim of a White Stuff bag coming through the door on many an occasion, unfortunately, from my wife.
That sounds like a cocaine deal.
That's true.
18 months expiries: Laura Ashley, Pizza Hut, Cafe Nero, and Ask Italian. 2 years is John Lewis, M&S, Mothercare, House of Fraser, Next, Oasis, Sports Direct, and WH Smith. 3 years, this is a bit better, Zara, Homebase, and Argos. Although Argos apparently have an e-card that only lasts 2 years. And the people with no expiry dates, there's 4 they've listed: Aldo, Starbucks, IKEA, and Disney. The only reason IKEA probably has no expiry date is because when you go in there, you get lost for eternity. So they have to make sure it's probably still valid by the time you find the find the checkout.
Did you say Aldo?
Is it Aldo? 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 Aldo?
I
don't know that. So again, people.
I thought you just pronounced Aldi wrong.
No, it's got no on the end. But anyway, so there we go. They are the expiry terms of all of those vouchers. So if you've got any of those, then make sure you book it or you flog it. Basically, you're probably better off selling them.
Yeah, so vouchers, not always a wise investment. Although, talking about investments, that takes us nice onto the last piece. That was a terrible link. Damien, we're going to talk investments.
We are.
Investing.
Investing. Now, we're not going to do a big thing on investing, but I was pondering what I was going to talk about, and I thought I might chuck in an investment piece, because this is a good time of year to be talking about investing. And like the January time, lots of people become really engaged with money, and it's a big time for us as well. Money to the masses. We get a lot of people coming to find out about all types of personal finance, and I was looking at the stock market and pondering where it's going to go, and I've done bits and pieces for 80/20 Investor, so maybe I might pick up on that next week about what the outlook for 2018 could be and the hiccups, because we've obviously hit all-time highs on the stock market, but obviously we're going to run out of time for that. So I was going to look at something called the January effect. And now if people don't know what the January effect in the stock market is, it's a tendency for what happens in January to dictate the rest of the year's profits or losses on the stock market. So if January is a good month, it tends to be that the rest of the year will be positive. Now, you look at 30 years going back, that seems to be the case. Since the year 2000, that's kind of broken down a bit. But while I was researching this, I actually stumbled across the most amazing podcast ever on the subject. And it was one of our own, podcast number 90. And it was from 2 years ago to almost, it was 2 years ago today. And one of the things people will realise with this podcast, we try and make evergreen content so you can listen to it whenever you want. And in that podcast, I even say, look, if you're listening to this in 2017 and 2018. So the homework for anyone listening to this podcast is go back through. It's number 90, although we don't number them on the list. If you look for January effect, and it would have been released in January 2016, there is a podcast all about the January effect and how you can try and predict what will happen in that year. And it was actually spookily sort of, well, what's the word I'm looking for?
Accurate?
It wasn't. It was accurate, but it was kind of, yeah, because it was what they predicted would happen. And you'll know what I mean if you go back and listen to it. And it's just as relevant now as it was then. And you'll also be able to hear how far we've come in this podcast, that the sound and also our probably presenting styles have improved somewhat. But the fact remains that all our back catalogue, and lots of people do go back and listen to it and try, and I've had people asking how they find back episodes, that it's all evergreen. It's deliberately made like that so people could go and gorge themselves on all those episodes. So go back and find it. The one thing to take away from it, which I will just give as a bit of a nugget, is that the Q1, so the first 3 months of the year, typically are the strongest time for people to invest for the long term. So if you're thinking of investing for the long term, then this period tends to be a good time to get into the market. I'm not talking about looking at where the market is now, just talking if you took a typical January, February, March period into history and you then got out at some point in the future, it tends to be fairly positive. And that is likely to be down to what I was alluding to, where people become interested in investing and demand picks up and people start putting more money to work. And the more money that is put to work, the higher prices go in anything, and that includes stocks. So do your homework, go and have a listen to it.
And just while you've been saying that, Damien, I've been feverishly going on to the app and finding out through the podcast app exactly where it's the one on the 8th of January 2016, and it's called Why January is a Key Investment Month, Contactless Payment Warnings and a New Type of Bank Account. So go back and listen to that one. It's the first time we've done a shout out to one of our own podcasts.
Do you know what? When I looked at it, I did think maybe I should do that more, because it encourages people to go back and pick up some of the old content, because otherwise how would you know? And I've heard other podcasts when they talk about interviews or something they've done in the past and pull it together, because occasionally, well, I do say, we talked about it previously on the podcast. Perhaps I'll actually tell people the title of the shows in future. That might be a resolution for me, Andy.
There we go. Good. Well, I've enjoyed it. Anything else, Damien?
No, that is it, Andy. We are done.
Well, please do get in touch in the usual ways. Damien loves to hear your feedback, questions, anything you want to post his way, and often it will get featured on the podcast itself. So it's at Money to the Masses with the number 2, and of course you can contact Damien by email at any time. It's podcast@moneytothemasses.com. Damien, we're done.
We are done, and who knows, if you have writing something particularly supportive and positive, you may feature in a future wall of love in the Money to the Masses towers.
Until next week.
Until next week, Andy.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.